would like to call the meeting to order at 9:39 a.m. I ask as a courtesy to all that you ensure that you've silenced your cell phones. Also, I would like to remind our directors to turn their microphone on each time you speak to help with the audio recording. For the record, I'll note that the public meeting notice was properly required by law, and the notice of this board meeting was provided to each one of our directors. At this time, I would like to ask Director Huber to deliver the invocation.
Pray with me. Our Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this beautiful day you've given us. We're thankful for all of your blessings. We're thankful mostly for giving us our Lord Jesus Christ, our Savior. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to serve on this board. We are privileged to serve our fellow Texans here, and we ask for wisdom as we deliberate the various resolutions and reports that come before us and the decisions that we have to make. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Directors Mike Fernandez, Tracy LaChance, and Jared Smith indicated they would not be present for this meeting. We've now reached the portion of the meeting where we have set aside time to hear from you, the general public. Those interested in providing comments by filling out one of the cards available at the receptionist desk will be called to approach the podium to make your comments at this time. And I have no cards. So seeing that no one wishes to speak, we will move on to the first agenda item, which is discussion and possible action on fiscal year 2025 annual operating plan, budget workshop, and adoption of budget by Michelle Gerrois, Chief Financial Officer. Michelle.
Morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Chairman Flores. Board, good morning. This item is to adopt formally our fiscal year 2025 annual operating plan, which includes our O&M budget, our capital budget, and also our system rate. Okay. There we go. Okay. We'll start by talking about our operating budget and the expense assumptions that went into creating that budget. The 2025 O&M budget includes an employee cost index increase of 2.5% and a merit pool of 3%. We're also expecting, for the first time in about 5 years, a substantial increase in our health insurance costs of roughly 23%. We will also be adding 5 full-time positions to our authorized position list. BRA's share of O&M expenses for storage in our federal reservoirs for fiscal year 25 is going to be $6.2 million in total. That's a $1 million increase from fiscal year 24. This amount also includes a one-time increase of $177,000 for some repair and maintenance work that they're doing at Lake Georgetown. We're also expecting an increase of $3.1 million in our professional services budget. That includes updates to our system operations water management plan. It's time for the 10-year update for that. That is due in November of 2026, so the work on that will start in fiscal year 25. We also have some dam inspections and dam surveys that go into that. So this is just an overall look at all of our expenses by category. The total O&M expenses for next year are going to be $92.7 million. And you can see the largest, that's not working. Okay, the largest part of that, of course, is salaries at 25%, followed by outside services at 18%, 16%, and then benefits, and then our debt service. Also included in the structure of our operating budget are our operating projects. Operating projects are non-recurring, multi-year, They usually don't create a major asset. They're mostly studies, assessments, and some major repair items. And so here you can see we have $7,075,000 budgeted for fiscal year 25, and also giving you a look out at what we have planned for the next 4 years after that. Some of the items you'll see in here we'll actually be discussing later on in this meeting. The Possum Kingdom Water Quality Modeling Tool, the Lake Whitney Reallocation Study, and the Risk-Based Capital Planning and Management Support. So now we'll switch gears and we'll talk about revenues a little bit. Our non-system water revenues for 2025, we're expecting revenue from the sales of LCRA water will be increasing due to an increase in LCRA's firm rate. That'll be an additional $460,000. And then water sales from ag revenue will increase as the ag rate is tied to our system rate. And also we have some additional units of ag water that we'll be selling next year due to the conversion of some of our long-term CPI water to ag water. In other revenues not related to water supply, we're expecting our interest income to increase by $1.8 million due to higher than anticipated cash balances and also our favorable interest rates. And fees for users of our treated water from our East Williamson County plant are expected to increase by $2.5 million due to higher water usage and changes in contract terms. So our revenues for next year are expected to be $102.3 million. And of that, you can see the largest part of that is our system water sales, followed by our cost reimbursable, our East Williamson County, and then our non-system water sales. So this graph shows a breakdown of the water units that we'll be selling, and they're represented in acre feet. You can see the largest part of that, of course, is our system rate, followed by our two tiers and then utility. So we have total units for sale next year, 726,783 acre feet. And so once we have our revenues and our non-system water revenues for the year, we're able to calculate our system rate. And so you can see we have our total water supply expenses for fiscal year 24 to 25 are going up from about $67 million to a little over $74.5 million. From that, we'll subtract our non-system water revenues and our other water supply revenues, which includes the interest income, to give us then we add in our debt service coverage requirement ratio of 1.3%. And that gives us our gross financial requirement. So you can see our gross financial requirement for fiscal year 25 is a little less than $3 million than it was in fiscal year 24. We then divide that by the number of system units that we have to bill in acre feet. And so that gives us a rate before any considerations of our rate stabilization fund of $92.74 an acre foot. And when we add in a contribution to our rate stabilization fund, that gives us a rate for fiscal year 25 of $99.50, which is a 6.4% increase over our fiscal year 24 rate. So this is a summary of our fiscal year 25 budget over all our lines of business, our water supply and our cost reimbursable. We expect to have beginning water supply reserves of $105.6 million. Our revenues and expenses and operating projects giving us a surplus of $4.6 million in the water supply and $5 million in the cost reimbursable. And then after capital improvement projects, we should have an ending water supply reserve of $72.1 million. And so it wouldn't be the budget if we didn't talk about the buckets. And so this shows how we break out that $72.1 million ending reserve into its different components. So we have a $5.5 million contingency fund and a $500,000 self-insurance fund. Those amounts don't change. The working capital fund is going to be $15.2 million. That reserve amount goes up over time as our O&M budget goes up over time. And the remainder goes into our rate stabilization fund, which for fiscal year 25, we expect to be a little over $50 million. And so now we'll talk about our multi-year capital improvement plan. So our CIP projects differ from our operating projects in that they are creating capital assets. They're multi-year in nature. And this breaks out the $43.1 million that we'll be spending in fiscal year 25 into the types of projects. And you can see the biggest part of that is new infrastructure. And that's followed by infrastructure maintenance, water distribution, and then new water projects. And this chart gives us a 5-year look at what we have in our capital projects. And you can see for fiscal year 25, the $43.1 million. But then as you look out over the next 4 years, you can see that almost doubles next year, does double next year to 87.1, 115, and then 90 million by 2028. And so the next thing that I'd like to show you is a little look at our 5-year financial forecast. And this is a product of our long-range financial plan. And so the elements that go into it are, and the assumptions behind it, we assume for revenues that all non-system water revenues are forecast based on the existing contracts. It's assumed that most non-system water supply contracts will convert to system water contracts when they expire. We assume that our ag contracts will renew as ag contracts at 70% of the system rate. We assume that revenue from any new water created by our projects is assumed to be sold at the system rate in the year following the completion of that project. On the expense side, we assume that O&M expenses increase by a historical 10-year rolling averages for years 26 through 29. The debt service is based on our existing debt schedules and any potential new debt we might issue. We're not planning to issue any debt in 2025, but we probably will have to issue debt in 2026. Operating projects and capital projects are layered into the model based on the most updated project budget worksheets. And so looking out 5 years, you can see fiscal year 25, we're starting with that $105.6 million in reserves. We're ending up with $72.1 million in reserves. But you can see in fiscal year 26, we're planning to spend $74.6 million in capital projects on the water supply side. So that if we don't issue debt next year in 2026, I mean, we wouldn't have sufficient ending reserves. We're also looking at issuing debt in fiscal year 27, 28, and 29. And you see at the bottom there, rate stabilization reserves used. That's where the money that we're putting into the rate stabilization fund now is used in the future to offset some of these capital projects and to keep our rates increasing at a steady, stable, predictable rate instead of having spikes in them. And so this is also looking at the 5-year forecast, looking at our system rate, the percentage increases. You can see all our increases for the next 5 years are under 7%. The number of acre feet that we expect to sell, looking at our debt service, and then the tests that we have to meet when we're setting our system rate. So we have to make sure that we're making our debt service coverage ratio, that we have our 90-day working capital reserve, our contingency reserve, our self-insurance reserve. And you can see from this, with the rate structure we've set in our model, that we're making all of our reserve requirement tests. And this is a forecast of the system rate as well as a look back through 2019. And so the rate we're proposing for fiscal year 25 is $99.50, and increasing by a little under 7% for at least the next 5 years. And are there any questions?
Any questions for Michelle? Mr. Lattimore?
I have a question.
You're showing a fairly significant increase. If you want to back up a couple of slides, right there, you're showing a fairly significant increase in the acre feet available, which is reflected in revenue. Can you tell us why the increase in system rate units between 25 and 26 and then going on out?
Yes, and actually I could probably show that a little better if we go back. And it's mostly expiring water contracts of different kinds here. If this went out, you could see it's some of the other fixed price and some of the other fixed price contracts that are expiring. And so we always assume that they'll renew as system price contracts.
Okay, thank you very much.
Question. On the debt coverage of 1.3, is that a bond requirement, or was that a board policy we did?
That is a board policy.
Is that for bonds or just debt in general? Or what?
That is for some bonds that are subject to coverage. Some of our debt is not subject to coverage. Right now, I think the only debt we have that is not subject to coverage is our the debt we have on our federal reservoirs.
It's a little high, isn't it? 1.3.
We set it at that, and it was the board's guidance to set it at that. As we go in to issue new debt, like we'll be doing in the next few years, this makes our debt much more attractive to rating agencies.
Yes, it will. It sure will.
If we get a better bond rating, we get a better interest rate.
Okay. And then on the self-insurance fund, what's your balance on that right now? If you're adding, was it $500,000 a year to it?
The balance is $500,000. We maintain $500,000.
You maintain $500,000?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions for Michelle? Seeing no other questions, please read the resolution.
Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority Board that the fiscal year 2025 annual operating plan and multi-year capital improvement plan budget as presented to the board at the July 29, 2024 meeting be approved and adopted, including the following provisions. Be it further resolved that the General Manager CEO is hereby authorized to make expenditures and enter into contracts for expenditures as listed in the budget in accordance with the Brazos River Authority's General Operations Practices Policy 2.01, Authority and Responsibilities of the Board of Directors and General Manager Chief Executive Officer. Be it further resolved that the General Manager CEO is hereby authorized to make adjustments in the individual line item amounts of the budget, provided that the total amount expended shall not exceed the total amount authorized for each operating division as follows. Water supply, $74,524,390. Cost reimbursable, $18,184,672. Total operating budget, $92,709,062. Water supply, $38,069,000. Cost reimbursable, $5,042,000. Total capital budget, $43,111,000. Be it further resolved that the board hereby adopts the multi-year capital improvement plan as presented in the budget. Be it further resolved that the board hereby approves and adopts a rate of $99.50 per acre foot of water annually for fiscal year 2025 for both the system water rate and the interruptible water rate. Be it further resolved that the board hereby approves and adopts a rate of $69.65 per acre foot of water annually for fiscal year 2025 for the agricultural water rate. Be it further resolved that the board hereby approves and adopts a methodology for quarterly payments and monthly payments to include a multiplier to be applied to the annual payment to allow the Brazos River Authority to recover interest lost on any unpaid balance plus a service charge for administrative costs, including but not limited to costs involving the billing, accounting, and collecting for quarterly or monthly payments. Be it further resolved by the board that the methodology used to determine the multiplier consists of applying the current savings rate the Brazos River Authority would be earning on funds if paid in full annually to the unpaid balance on a monthly or quarterly schedule to determine lost interest, and that the service charge shall remain at $20 per invoice to cover additional administrative costs for billing, accounting, and collecting the associated payments. And be it further resolved that the board hereby approves and adopts an annual interest rate of 5% and a daily interest rate charge of 0.0136986%, 5% divided by 365, to be applied for quarterly and monthly payments for fiscal year 2025.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Motion made by Presiding Officer Hubert, second made by Director Flores. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geezy,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Khan, Director Crone,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Presiding officer, may I take a moment?
Yes.
So here's what happens next. We rock on through August, and at the end of August, we have a ice cream social to celebrate the end of our fiscal year. And then when we report back to work the next Tuesday, because Monday's a holiday, we begin putting together next year's budget. It's a year-long process, and I just want to thank Michelle Giroir for her leadership. I want to thank her staff for just being relentless and holding our staff accountable for the money that we spend. And then the budget process touches everybody in the organization, and I'm real proud of the document that they put together and the way that we monitor our money. So, Michelle, thank you so much for your leadership, and I appreciate all that you and your staff do. Thank you.
In
Thank
fact,
you,
in
Michelle.
just a moment,
Yay.
I'd like to recognize Cassidy Kelly.
Yay.
Who's my, she is my girl Friday, and I could not do it without her.
And Director Huber would also like to make a comment.
And Michelle, I just want to compliment you on the binder that you put together, you and your staff, with the operating plan and the budget. That was a wonderful presentation, and it told everything you need to know about the whole Brazos River Authority as well. So it was very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. We enjoy doing it. It's a one time of year, us little accountants get to be creative and do something.
It was very creative.
Something that's not an Excel spreadsheet.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 2, discussion and possible action on cyber liability and data breach response coverage, cyber coverage, interlocal agreement by Michelle Drouin, Chief Financial Officer.
All right, this item has to do with a change to our property and liability insurance through Texas Municipal League, or TML. Back in 2016, TML started offering cyber coverage as one of their perils that's insured under the property and liability coverage. Back on June 7th, we received a letter from TML stating that they are going to be creating a separate fund for their cyber coverage, and it would require us to execute an interlocal agreement in order for us to continue coverage, and that has to be done by October 1st. So that's why we're bringing it to you all to look at today. Under their new pool, they're going to be offering 2 levels of coverage, Core and Core Plus. The annual premium for Core is going to be $1,500. The annual premium for Core Plus is $1,875 a year. So staff is recommending that we go with the Core Plus coverage. Our technology department is looking at other options, maybe something with a little more robust coverage for cybersecurity. We thought we had a little more time to do that because our coverage doesn't renew until November, but then we got this letter in June, so we had to bring this to you all right now. TML, tell you a little bit about them. They insure 2,800 governmental entities in Texas. They cover 98% of the cities in Texas. And the cyber coverage that we have covers things like cyber extortion, data recovery, business interruption, payment card liabilities, things like that. Any questions?
Oh, go ahead, Director Sapp.
Up to what amount? So if there was a ransomware.
So wait, hold on. We will be having a security committee meeting in September, and we'll bring you that amount in executive session.
Okay.
Also with what our recommendations are for additional coverage. Would prefer not to answer questions about specific dollar figures in the public sector while the bad guys might be watching.
Okay.
Same question.
Bro.
Director Embro.
Requirements that we have to put in place from a cybersecurity infrastructure to be covered?
Let Luke answer that. I know that there are trainings that are required, but I'll let Luke talk about that.
Yeah, so are you talking in reference to just the cybersecurity insurance or
Introduce
just overall? Oh, I am Luke, CTO, Chief Technology Officer. You already seen me talk about IT and cybersecurity stuff. But yeah, so for this insurance in particular, there's no requirements. It's pretty basic. But the insurance that we're investigating getting will require like an audit internally, but we're very confident we'll meet those and exceed the expectations of those audits. So.
And what are we doing to make sure that we're prepared for that?
For this?
Well, the one that we're pursuing.
For the one we're pursuing, well, we maintain a robust cybersecurity program internally. We meet a lot of the requirements that most organizations don't. So we have plenty of, and actually, as David alluded to, next board session, we're going to go over a little bit more of those specific preparations. I try not to talk about more of the stuff that we're doing internally as not to give anybody a extra step or any information about this. That's why I actually pulled the liability limits for this, because any information we give them, they're just going to use that against us. And so I try to keep that limited. I'm very paranoid when it comes to this type of stuff. And you'll get all that information next session. And I'll have all that as far as a better answer for that.
All right, just thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
All right, Seeing no other questions, please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to execute an interlocal agreement with Texas Municipal League Intergovernmental Risk Pool, TML, for cyber liability and data breach response coverage, cyber coverage.
You've heard the reading of the resolution.
I make a motion.
Okay. And we have a motion made by Director Wilson and a second by Director Savage. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores.
Yes.
Director Huber.
Yes.
Director Lloyd.
Yes.
Director Abraham.
Yes.
Director Boren.
Yes.
Director Geezy.
Yes.
Director Henderson.
Yes.
Director Jimenez.
Yes.
Director Khan. Director Crone.
Yes.
Director Lattimore.
Yes.
Director Embro.
Yes.
Director Parks.
Yes.
Director Ruiz.
Yes.
Director Savage.
Yes.
Director Taylor.
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
The third item, the Board of Directors will conduct a closed meeting and executive session on the following matters. A, to deliberate regarding the position of General Manager, CEO pursuant to the authority granted by Section 551.074 of the Texas Open Meetings Act, codified by Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. If you're not specifically involved in the presentation of this executive session item, please excuse yourself from the boardroom at this time. With each executive session item, time will be allowed to clear the boardroom. Call for the next presenters. We ask that the public please wait in the break room in order to keep the hallways clear till the executive session is finished. Hereby reconvenes into open session at 10:45 a.m. I would like to invite Director Wilson to make a few comments in regards to chairing our Executive Compensation and Evaluation Committee. Director Wilson.
The committee did meet this morning. We did our evaluation of the general manager, CEO, David Collinsworth. Out of that evaluation, we also discussed salary and bonus. For the evaluation, we have given him an exemplary rating. As far as a recommendation for the salary and bonus, that would be a 4% bonus of his existing salary. Increase in annual salary increase of his existing salary, and a one-time merit bonus of 16% of his existing salary. And that's the recommendation of the committee. And I'll answer any questions if there is a question.
David, I just want to say that we've seen you grow in this role, and you've done an amazing job. You have a wonderful team, and you have created a wonderful team. They say you get people around you that are smarter than you, makes you look really good. You've done a great job.
Thank you.
If you'd have been in the committee meeting, that would have been a classic example of that.
Are there any other comments for David before we read the resolution?
I'd like to thank him on behalf of the board and the committee for a job well done. And I'd also like to thank the committee for their job and for their input this morning working on this.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. All right. Please read the resolution.
Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that the sustained exemplary performance by the General Manager CEO warrants an annual salary increase of 4% of his existing salary and justifies a one-time merit bonus of 16% of his existing salary.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion made by Director Lloyd, a second by Director Huber. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Warren,
Yes.
Director Geezy,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Hunnell,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on risk-based asset management and capital planning software by Blake Kettler, Technical Services Manager. Blake.
So I'm going to steal just a few minutes of his thunder. This is something that we're really excited to bring to the board. And I would explain it a couple of ways. First of all, we talk about the long-term planning of everything that we're going to do so that our customers can begin to understand 10, 15, 20 years of what our system rate's going to look like, what it's going to cost us to do the jobs that our customers need us to do. What you don't know is what you don't know. And we've worked really hard to put into place a risk-based process so that we can look into the assets that we own and begin to understand how these older assets that are in really good condition are going to age and weather and what the expenses are going to look like to keep those operations in place. In the past, you've seen us bring to you this wonderful item called surplus. And from time to surplus, what do we call it? Surplus property. And we're divesting of these things, and in those are things like automobiles. And we can go back and pull the records from those automobiles because we've had a software called Micromain where we keep up with warranties, oil changes, tires. And if you look at that and you were to go dig around in there, you'd find pumps and all type of assets that the BRA has. And that software has served us well, but it's old and it's antiquated, and we're trying to take it to the next generation and be able to better predict all of the cost associated long-term with all of those assets, but then also begin to predict the large-scale projects for redoing our dams. And Blake and his team and a group of engineers that he's going to introduce have spent a lot of time. We've looked at Possum Kingdom, we've looked at East Williamson County, and we're really at a good point in time beginning to implement something I think is going to be very beneficial for the BRA. So take it away.
All right. Thank you, David. Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Excuse me. With this agenda item, we will request authorization to move forward with acquiring a new asset management software or computerized maintenance management system to supplement our capabilities being developed through the risk-based asset management and capital planning program. This falls within the strategic plan under goals, objectives, and strategies 4B. So when talking assets, we're referring to any and all real property items owned or operated by the BRA. This could be anything from a water valve, a pump motor, to items as large as a Tanner Gate dam or pipeline. So we're in the process of pursuing a risk-based approach to asset management by considering likelihood of failure, consequence of failure, and redundancy on an individual asset perspective. As you may recall, in 2021, the Brazos River Authority began its initiative with Carollo Engineers to implement a new asset management program at the organization. Ann Casey, our project manager with Carollo, is here with us today if you want to wave, Ann. And also, I'd like to point out David Jones, our capital improvement planning administrator. He's also our project manager sitting next to Ann, has done an outstanding job progressing this initiative. This program formalizes a process to define the relative risk posed to operations from any single asset, as well as assess the BRA's risk profile presented by all assets. This will allow us to better understand our asset holdings and take a more efficient approach to maintenance, rehabilitation, and replacement considerations. Ultimately, once this initiative is complete, it will improve our operational resiliency and business continuity abilities. So currently we use, as David pointed out, a system called Micromain, and its functions are to track cost and provide for preventative maintenance, warranty information, and labor associated with maintaining assets. While this system performs as it was designed, it's lacking the capabilities needed by the organization to consider a risk perspective and capital planning efficiencies. The new risk-based program will not only be a database of the assets like Micromain, but will have the components to improve decision-making on asset renewal, rehabilitation, and replacement through prioritization of the assets and long-term forecasting. To date, the capital improvement planning efforts have been successful in considering a 5 to 10-year window of future projects. However, with this new program, our goal is to look much further into the future and ultimately consider a 50-year planning horizon. This long-term planning effort will provide the stability to the system rate by determining the timing and estimated cost for future projects. So the program has been progressing well with the support from Carollo. We've been performing under tasks 1, 2, 3, and 5 of our contracted services. Task 4 is an optional task to expand the systematic approach at our pilot programs to the remaining BRA facilities, depending on our comfort in performing this in-house. No work has been done under Task 4 yet. So just kind of a quick summary of what we've done to date in this initiative. To date, under Task 1, BRA selected the framework to follow through the Institute of Asset Management, or IAM, to structure our new program for alignment with ISO 55000. Although we do not have the intentions nor see the benefit as an organization to becoming certified by ISO, it will benefit BRA to follow industry standards when practical. As part of this process, to align ourselves with these standards, under Task 1, Carollo performed a gap assessment of BRA's asset management knowledge, structure, and tracking capabilities, highlighting the areas that we need to focus on improving to meet these standards. Overall, the gap assessment established that there are many areas, or there are areas of improvement, but we're on track and moving in the right direction to close those gaps based on assessments of similar entities. We have also defined levels of service, key performance indicators, risk criteria, among other parameters to standardize the approach in assessing an asset's imposed risk across the organization. This information developed has been applied under Task 3 at our pilot programs at Possum Kingdom and East Williamson County Water Treatment Plant. Asset inventory and condition assessment were part of the fieldwork performed by the Carollo team. So the noted benefits of going through the exercise of establishing the pilot programs was truly implementing the risk approach and understanding how well maintained our assets are by our operations folks. Carollo complemented both facilities with the excellent condition in which the assets are attended to. Currently, the BRA and Carollo team is evaluating the asset assumptions, including useful life, replacement costs, and reinvestment action for all assets. For assets that can be rehabilitated, the team is assessing the maximum number of rehabs, anticipated rehab cost, and revitalization, which will be included in the CIP model in Task 5. Moving forward, we will complete the development of the asset management program framework and CIP modeling, along with the implementation of the proposed asset management and capital planning software to complement these efforts if approved by the board of directors here today. Also, the finalized risk criteria will be applied to the remaining BRA facilities, and the long-range and capital improvement planning program will be developed. The software selection is Task 2. This is the last critical component needed to bring this initiative home, and that's the basis for the conversation here today. As part of the services provided by Carollo, they assisted BRA in the solicitation and procurement of a new asset management and capital planning software. So in pursuit of this software, BRA advertised RFP 2302-1288 for the acquisition and implementation of a computerized maintenance management system. A total of 11 responsive proposals were received. The evaluation committee determined NextGen was the most highly qualified provider after review of proposals, multiple demonstrations, and multiple interviews. Negotiations for a fair and reasonable price were successful, and staff recommends NextGen for the CMMS upgrade. Just to kind of give you an understanding of what this group looked like that was going through this review, we had all levels throughout the organization because this is one of those initiatives that will touch all levels, all departments at the organization. So we had members of, the folks that are out there in operations, doing the inspections, doing some of the work, to the administrators, to our IT department that'll help support some of this, and also all the way up to management that will receive some of the reporting functions and things out of this program. So everybody really saw the benefit of what NextGen brought to the table. So there are many benefits of this software in the organization, which can be seen here under usability, sustainability, and intelligence. The main ones here are ease of use, increased efficiency, strong reporting, and long-term planning capabilities. The takeaway is that this is a very robust system to perform all the functions and workflows that we request, while allowing the ease of use and increased efficiency at all levels throughout the organization. So proposers were required to provide an established CMMS software along with the necessary experience and staff to provide and manage implementation of a complete system. The CMMS would be a commercial, off-the-shelf solution that fulfills requirements out of the box with only configuration changes, a clear upgrade path, and ongoing maintenance and support. The service provided will include project management, software licensing, implementation, training, and support services. The CMMS will also support BRA-specific workflows, such as administrative work request management, materials and parts inventory, reports generation, portable wireless and mobile technology, asset management, of course, data and import conversion, system documentation, training and support, and integration with our other systems. Here you can see the taskings to bring us to full implementation, which we're thinking right now it could take upwards to a year to year and a half by migrating all of our information over, the training, all that type of stuff that goes into that. The initial cost for implementation for NextGen is approximately $478,720 when looking at tasks 1 through 7. The total 5-year cost for NextGen is $865,514. The additional $386,794 in task 8 is for licensing and support over the 5-year period. This amount is within the standard industry range for implementation. So when we started this whole initiative, we've had ongoing discussions with Corolla on kind of what could we expect this software to cost, and generally looking at the components that we were after. How robust of a system, we've always kind of settled around the 550 to 1.5 million cost range that this software would end up running BRA. So we've kind of coordinated this throughout the project with Corolla, and so it kind of falls right in that happy medium spot. Just one thing, I do have a resolution for consideration. I just wanted to thank the project team that kind of helped out there. IT, they've done an excellent job helping us evaluate these, really driving down the cost. That cost initially came in a lot higher, and so our folks have been outstanding in negotiating, getting us a reasonable cost there. So I do have a resolution for consideration, but we'll entertain any questions.
Questions? Yes. Director Taylor has a question.
Does the,
Oh,
I'm sorry,
sorry. I didn't hear.
the migration effort, who will be doing that? Would that be BRA staff or would that be the vendor?
No, sir. It'll be the vendor. The vendor will take all the information we have and migrate it into the new system with NextGen.
And a follow-up question, will this integrate into your SCADA system?
As of right now, I don't believe we are going to integrate it into our SCADA system. Correct, Brett?
To begin with, no, that may be something that is on the horizon in the future.
The SCADA system will be monitored and followed in this system as an asset, but we won't use this asset to manage and monitor the SCADA system from an operational perspective.
Correct. Thanks.
Okay. That answer your question?
That was my question.
So the components, they will be assets within there. Like if they need to be replaced or they have a certain life cycle or we need to do any kind of preventive maintenance or stuff of that nature, they will be tracked in there, but we won't monitor, the SCADA through the system.
Sure. Okay.
Director Taylor.
Did, in your process of evaluating this system, did you talk to their actual customers who've been using this for several years and about how it works, and did they use it, and was it of good value, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, sir, we did. And one of the similar entities that we talked to is GBRA, the Guadalupe Blanco River Authority. They also use this system, have been really impressed with it. It's really helped them out from an efficiency standpoint.
I don't want this to end up like a master plan, which is a great document. It looks real pretty, and everybody oohs and ahs over it, and then goes on a shelf, and nobody does a damn thing with it.
Understood. Yes, sir. No, it's going to be one of those things that it will be integrated into across the organization. Everybody's going to be in this system on a daily basis, whether that's pulling work orders or inputting information. Then we'll pull reports out of it to help us build CIP.
So this will basically be a new way of doing business.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Did you say Corolla or Next Gen representatives are with us today?
Next Gen is not, but Corollo is, who's helping us set the program up as a whole.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Blake, I just wanted to commend you because this is extremely important in the professionalization of our organization, the speed, on how we get to the right things, because you got to always force rank it because there's never enough resources. And I'm also really pleased to see that we had a good bid response with 11 suppliers. So that's a sign of a healthier relationship with our supplier base. And I know you guys have been working on that. I've been pushing on that myself specifically. And so I just want to say, this is a great work, and I think it's going to really help us, because the real big risks are the ones that we can't really see coming. And those are in Tiffany's shop with things like mussels and snakes and endangered species and PFAS. And so, we might have to, call an audible, if we get hit with some regulatory issues. So this is just real important to have it ready so we know how to respond, based upon a risk-based priority.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? All right. I see there's a resolution. Please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO to negotiate and execute a contract with Next Gen Asset Management for a computer maintenance management system, CMMS, to further support development of the BRA's risk-based asset management and capital planning program at a not-to-exceed cost of $865,514.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Director Ruiz, a second made by Director Taylor.
Anybody on that side?
Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Abraham?
Yes.
Director Boren?
Yes.
Director Geezy?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Jimenez?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Embro?
Yes.
Director Parks?
Yes.
Director Ruiz?
Yes.
Director Savage?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Agenda item number 5, discussion and possible action on water resource modeling contract for Lake Whitney reallocation by Aaron Abel, Water Services Manager, and Destiny Rashuber, Staff Counsel.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. This item requests authorization to negotiate and execute a contract for water resources modeling in connection with the Lake Whitney reallocation feasibility study. In this presentation, we'll provide some background and overview on what the Lake Whitney reallocation feasibility study is. We'll talk a bit about the existing storage in Lake Whitney and how it's currently allocated, and the potential for changes in that allocation. We'll provide also an overview of the study components of what goes into a reallocation study, especially at Whitney. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about why the modeling that we're coming before you today is necessary. So let me see if I can. So existing and future needs around and downstream of Lake Whitney could be met by expanding BRA's water supply capability through evaluating the current storage allocations in the largest reservoir in the basin. So Whitney is the largest reservoir in the Brazos River Basin. The last time the storage allocations at Whitney were evaluated was in the early 1970s, so about 50 years ago. Federal funding for the Corps to undertake this study was approved as part of a spending bill in December of 2022 that was signed into law. And, since Whitney is a core reservoir, it's a multi-purpose reservoir, that study process is it's federally driven by the Corps. We began the study in April of last year, and the study is progressing in what the Corps calls a 3x3x3 policy. So I'll break that down for you. 3 years, the study will be done in 3 years or less, $3 million or less, and then 3 levels of the core. So the core is divided into certain sections. So there's district, the division, which has multiple districts under the division, and then headquarters, which is the national headquarters of the Corps. So BRA is a 50% cost share in the study. So we're providing $1.5 million towards the study. And then the authorization to proceed was provided by the board in July of 2018. So ultimately, we see the potential to augment and expand our water supply capabilities at Whitney by reevaluating the water that's stored in the reservoir. And, that should be more cost effective than other water management strategies that are out there. Just an overview of where Lake Whitney is located. So this is, of course, a map of the BRA water supply system. You'll see Possum Kingdom, our most upstream reservoir, Lake Granbury, and then Lake Whitney is downstream, all on the main stem of the Brazos River. So the largest reservoir in the basin, centrally located. And so it's strategic in that additional water supply could benefit both local and the region. A lot of times we release water from Lake Whitney, it moves downstream, providing water to our customers along the main stem. So it is an area that could strategically benefit the whole basin. So diving down into a little bit about how the current allocation is set out in Whitney. So it is a multi-purpose reservoir and one that is unique in that other core reservoirs in the basin don't have hydropower. So Whitney does have a hydropower component, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Obviously, in addition to hydropower and water supply, there's also flood control. Whitney is a major cog in flood control in the Brazos River Basin. As far as hydropower generation at Lake Whitney, it is administered through the Southwestern Power Administration. That's a federal agency that operates within the Department of Energy. Southwestern Power Administration contracts with other entities to dispatch hydropower and provide energy and electricity to the ERCOT grid. Also, BRA obviously contracts with the Corps for storage, and we have the only state water right at Lake Whitney. And we'll talk a little bit about our storage in Whitney and the hydropower in the next slide. But I want to point out, so I mentioned flood control pool. So this is the flood pool. The top elevation is 571. It's full today at 533. That's the bottom of the flood pool or top of conservation. So there's about 1.4 million acre feet of water that the Corps can use to store flood water. Below 533, we consider this the conservation pool, and that is divided between water supply and hydropower. We'll talk a little bit more about the breakdown in this next slide, but essentially the conservation pool, which is between 533 and below, is divided several different ways. So between 520 and 533, it's around 260,000 acre feet. And that 260,000 acre feet is divided by the Southwest Power Administration, which is about 78% of that storage. And then our storage, BRA's water supply storage, is around 57,000 acre feet. And just to put that in perspective, 57,000 acre feet when Lake Whitney is full is about 2 feet. So if you drop the lake level from 533 to 531, that's essentially the amount of water stored for water supply. Below 520 is what's called the Powerhead Reserve allocation. And you can think of that allocation as storage reserve to produce adequate water levels for hydropower operations. So you can see the turbines, that's what water flows through to spin the actual turbine. So the inlet elevation for the turbines is 475. You have to have water levels, above the turbines to, efficiently produce hydropower. And so this unpermitted, uncontracted storage essentially is reserved for Powerhead. In the Whitney reallocation study, multiple scenarios have been envisioned to rethink the existing allocations as we see it today. One thing is you could change the allocation between water supply and hydropower between the elevations of 530 and 520. So this 78% and 22% that is divided, that could be changed. Also, the bottom of the storage between 530 and 520 could be lowered. So basically adjusting the Powerhead Reserve allocation. That could essentially cause increased storage in this portion of the reservoir. And then also that would come into play with the allocations and partitions between BRA storage and Southwest Power Administrations. And then finally, the Corps of Engineers is also required in reallocation studies to look at reallocating the flood control pool into water supply. Now, ultimately, all of these scenarios that I talked about will be heavily scrutinized, and many will be eliminated through additional analysis. And we'll get to the modeling here pretty soon, I promise. A final reallocation scenario will be selected and then recommended to be moved forward in the final feasibility study. And so it will that'll be represented in a report, and it will go through the 3 levels of the Corps. Much of that evaluation of those reallocation scenarios will be conducted using computer modeling, essentially to simulate the scenarios. The Corps is required to develop a system-wide computer model to evaluate these reallocation scenarios and the feasibility of those scenarios. It uses a system known as Riverware, which is a proprietary system. It's a private software. The modeling system is complex and is set up to model both water supply and hydropower operations at Lake Whitney. In addition to that, it also models all the other reservoirs within the system from a flood control perspective. So they actually use Riverware to operate the flood control storages across their system. The model provides information on many different factors and considerations when determining if a reallocation scenario is feasible. And those include the economic factors, dam safety, environmental concerns, and cultural considerations. So I think now I'll turn it over to Destiny and talk about the necessity of this modeling.
Thank you. And then, hi everyone. I presented once before, but my name's Destiny Rauschber. I am staff counsel here at the BRA. I work under Laura Lee. Essentially, for this project, this model is incredibly complex, and we have a lot of different options, like Aaron was talking about, of ways in which we could handle this reallocation. However, we expect that any change in the allocation to Lake Whitney that is will be in opposition from hydropower, and we really need this model to be precise then, if that's the case, because we, one, want Whitney to be achieved, the reallocation to be achieved. The model will help determine how much volume of water is available to reallocate to BRA and the cost of that. So if there's any amount that results in a change in hydropower's amount, we will be responsible for the cost. So we put out a solicitation process and came back with Hazen and Sawyer who we are incredibly excited about. They have worked on 5 other major reallocations, and these projects are pretty few and far between. So the fact that they've worked on so many of these is very exciting. And they have experience with all of the highly complex modeling that we're talking about, Riverware, Oasis, HEC, ResSim. And they also provided litigation support on the back end for some of these reallocations. So essentially, just due to the highly sensitive nature of the modeling and the fact that we are expecting some opposition, it's really important to get in a secondary group so that we can quality control check the Corps' work, make sure that there's no errors, ensure that all the calculations related to hydropower is something we're comfortable with and something that we're willing to defend. And then also verify that the reallocation scenario that we've picked is the most efficient and effective way to meet the future needs of the basin. So we have a resolution, but we also can take any questions that y'all may have.
We have a question right here, Director Huber.
So, as I understand it, then SWAPA is going to push back against this. And if there is any of their water reallocated to us, we'll have to negotiate a price that we have to pay for it for them. Is that right?
Essentially, the model will output, it's a very complicated process, but essentially the model will help determine that. It won't be something where we'll feel comfortable doing one or the other. We'll have to defend what the Corps comes up with.
But to answer your question, yes, they will want some type of payment buy for that water.
Okay.
Director Lattimore.
Get my mic turned on here. I think I heard something new in the presentation. It sounded to me like the model that the Corps is going to use would include modeling not only for Lake Whitney, but would consider the Brazos above and below. Is that correct?
Yeah, so from a flood control perspective, the Corps has essentially 9 flood control reservoirs. And, the 8 reservoirs that we contract storage here, let me see. Yeah.
So the Corps is going to evaluate, they're going to evaluate everything that they can evaluate. And it's typical of a reallocation study that you would be asking for reallocation into the flood storage. Our allocation study is pretty unique in that we're not doing that, but they are still going to study the impacts of if the BRA were to receive more water, how would that impact their ability and their risk of flood mitigation?
Well, the second part of my question is, does that open up the discussion and increase the potential for opposition from other parties above and below? In other words, I understood that SWAPA might be opposed, but does this mean that other entities might be able to enter the discussion?
Yeah, just due to the nature of the beast of a federal reallocation project, there's always the chance that there may be more opposition than what we're expecting. However, we've been working with SWAPA and the Corps collectively to make sure that that is all handled in a very holistic way. And so,
hold on a second. Director Henderson first.
Wait, hold on. I don't think we've answered Director Lattimore's question. Director Lattimore, I think the answer is yes, it could bring more people to the table, but the more opportunity for water will bring other people to the table in favor of what this does for the management of the entire system for the BRA.
Thank you very much. That answers the question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Henderson.
So one of the things we're talking about here is the volume of water. And it looks like what we're doing is only looking at the USACE volumes. And I think some of this needs to be looked at from a federal standpoint. Like FEMA has their own volumes as well, and they don't always match up. I just want to make sure that that's part of the study as well, to make sure that we're using the most conservative in rainfall numbers in this basin. I think I just want to make sure that we're looking across the board at that.
We're looking at stored water storage potential in the reservoir. Aaron, am I correct? Not so much
That's correct. So
flood potential outside of the reservoir nor inundation areas. They'll be looking at the flooding capacity, the flood storage, the flood pool of this reservoir and how it would impact other reservoirs.
yes, that is correct. So I think you're talking about FEMA and flooding potential, maybe like downstream and upstream. So this is more the allocations of storage within the reservoir itself. How can those be revisioned to adequately supply, additional water supply?
Well, kind of. What I was thinking of more is we're looking at the volume in this basin, in this
Reservoir,
lake,
yeah.
right? And I just want to make sure that we're using the right rainfall volumes because it seems to be it's not something that's across the board. You go to this thing and use that number. And I see them changing across the region. So I just want to make sure that we've looked at that. We're using the most conservative numbers because that number could change based on those.
Yes.
Maybe I'm getting too technical.
Well,
and if I am, it's okay.
The Corps, the Corps of Engineers, for the Riverware model and what they use, they do use the hydrology and what flows into the reservoirs and how to manage that, both from a flood control and water supply perspective. This is a federally driven study. And I mean, we can get the answers for that. The Corps, I mean, we're going to be, if we move forward in this modeling, we're going to be receiving the Riverware model and we'll be able to look at all the inputs to that model, including, what they use for inflows and, getting to your point as far as the rainfall runoff.
Director Henderson, you're looking for bookends, and on the one bookend, the Corps will use what is allocated in the flood pool because this project of the Corps can't store more water than what's in the flood pool.
Right.
So that would be on one bookend, that would be the max number that they would use for how they would model.
You're spot on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Director Savage.
David, I have a question. Go ahead.
Aaron, this company, Hazen, so the Corps will do the modeling themselves and we'll use this river software, correct? And then they will make their determination, based upon their own model. Now, what we're doing is we want to have a duplication of that model with an expert who's worked on these allocations to see if there's any finer points and to make our argument stronger or, maybe massage it.
And one, exactly. The other thing that I wanted to point out is, from the Corps' perspective, they have to not only look at hydropower and water supply and flood control and environmental and dam safety, they have to look at all of that through those multiple lenses.
Right.
From our perspective, we're focusing on obviously water supply and hydropower to the extent that we have to mitigate those costs. And so it's more of a finer modeling exercise and honing in on what is important to BRA, which is water supply.
So I understand that. So we are anticipating opposition from SWAPA, right? Are they using the same consultant? I guess I just want to make sure, if is there going to be another company that's doing the same modeling but looking more from the hydropower?
No, so I do want to emphasize one thing. Our company won't be redoing the model. They will be assessing the same model that the Corps is using.
Oh,
and SWAPA will also be looking at the same model the Corps is using. What we're hoping to do with this project is take a proactive approach so that on the back end we can defend the model and know that it's strong because we've had the opportunity to assess it from a secondary source.
Okay, so SWAPA will be doing their own analysis on the same models. Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
we have Director Huber here.
Destiny and Aaron. So the allocation study they're going to do is we're mostly interested in some of that hydropower water, but they're going to also investigate reallocating part of the flood pool as well in that study, right?
We're interested in many different options.
So we'd be interested in that as well, right? Anything we can get.
The flood pool is not something that we're necessarily interested in. It's really important for these reallocations that you assess every scenario, and that's something that as the defendants will have to continue to prove up. So we'll have to take a look at everything, regardless if it's something we're going to pursue or not.
So if they reallocate a portion of the flood pool, that would raise the conservation pool level, right? And give us, be more water available for us if we could get it. Is that
Yeah,
right?
ideally we'd like to defend whatever the Corps is willing to give us.
Okay, we'll take whatever is available.
Yeah, I will say, from a perspective of reallocating the flood control pool, that potentially could cost a lot of money, related to having to potentially raise the dam, and the other infrastructure related to, the flood control part of that. So, we see this reallocation more, from the top of conservation downward instead of going up in the flood control pool. But it's required by the Corps that they look at that, as Destiny mentioned.
Okay, so we're not just talking about just raising the conservation pool level a little bit and taking away some of the flood pool, are we?
No.
Even though they've got tons of flood pool there available.
Right. We're more interested in the storage, this 615,000 acre feet that is separate from the flood control pool.
Yeah, the flood pool comes with some dam safety concerns, so sticking more to the conservation area is going to be beneficial for everyone.
Okay, thank you.
All right, go ahead, your turn.
Allocation, we have no say, no benefit. That's strictly off our table, isn't it? Pretty much.
We have no say. Our focal point is all of the water from the top of conservation down to the top of the inactive pool.
Okay.
So that's what we're asking is the way that ERCOT manages the power grid and the way the generators generate is the way that this water was allocated back in 1970 still appropriate for today, the way the lake is used. That's what we're asking.
So out of curiosity, with the ERCOT, was there a disconnect the past few years when they had all their loss of power?
So
do you know that, or is
I'm not privileged to that. No, sir. Okay. I'm not privileged to that. But it is apparent to us that the turbines at the dam are used less than they were in the 90s and early 2000s. So hopefully there is an opportunity for the state of Texas to benefit from some water being used more efficiently.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Director Lloyd has a question or comment.
So, kind of overview regulatory process wise, Emily. Destiny. Why I do that when I second guess and I go ahead and say it. Destiny. The process is going to be basically evaluating whether there's more water available to be adjudicated by the state. Would that be like amending our certificate of adjudication in the river and then tying that into the SysOps? Is that a process after the core process?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So once we, if we're successful in getting additional storage in Whitney, we would enter into a contract with the Corps for that additional storage, and then we would have to go to the TCQ to amend our water right and augment our current water right to the
add the volume, change the use.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's exactly the state aspect of it. We
Correct.
Work in the federal joint.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I understand the whole process.
Yeah.
And then at that point, there's more water available in the lake. Is it available to anybody if they apply to the state? And also, is the priority date that year, or does it go back to our original priority date? Or would you let the lawyers argue over that?
Yeah, well, we'll have to look into more of the specific as the time comes, because right now we're on the portion of the reallocation that we're focused on would be defending up whatever reallocation scenario we get first. And that's going to be a lengthy process in and of itself. And then get to the state aspect, which may involve some of your questions, but I don't have the answers to those right now.
Okay.
Maybe we can keep the old water right and the old stuff and then the new water right.
I feel like we're assuming we're first in line for it, in a way.
As the non-federal sponsor, yeah.
But is that assumption we've weighed the risk that that's not a correct assumption? David, are you?
I think we have to determine how the water is allocated and if the water's SWAPAs or if the water's not SWAPAs. And then there will be a timing component of when you would file a permit for that water based on how much you think you get. So there's some execution of the game plan here. But yes, it would have to be permitted, and it wouldn't be a part of our system operations permit. It would be theoretically a new permit through the state of Texas if that water's not already allocated somewhere in the state of Texas.
It would be a pretty junior right.
I would think that it would be a junior right, but I'll turn to Brad and Laura Lee for some help with that one. But I think that's probably right, Director Lloyd.
We can get you more information on that as well.
Okay.
Unless Brad wants to.
I'm next anyway.
All right.
He's going to answer that.
I'm just real quick on that last thing. To your point, Director Lloyd, the Corps, we're the only local sponsor in these reservoirs for water supply. And we go through this process. The Corps is not going to go contract with someone else for a process that we went through and that we're going to have to pay for. So I think there's very low risk that anybody jumps in line in front of us.
All right, Brad. What do you mean they're not going? Are they prohibited from doing so? Are we?
Not right.
Who's going to own the water?
We're going to have to contract with the Corps of Engineers. If they approve the reallocation study and say, okay, yes, there's X amount of acre feet that can be reallocated to water supply, we're going to have to amend our storage contract with the Corps, and it's going to be ours. They're not going to go out and market that to other entities that, hey, the study's been done, we've got more water, would you like to contract with us?
That's what I'm getting at. Look what the BRA paid for. There's water available. Anybody want it? I don't want to get to that point, and I'm sure we wouldn't, but
right.
I feel like we ought to ask.
There's very low risk that we go through this process and we don't end up with control of that water.
All right.
All right. Director Henderson has a follow-up question to that.
One more follow-up question. How long does a study like this, how long do you anticipate it taking? Is this like a 4-month thing, a 2-month thing, a 8-year thing? How long does it take?
It's 3 years. I mean, it's supposed to take 3 years.
So will you come back to us next year with another resolution for more money, or is that 280 will be over the 3 years?
Yeah, no, the goal is to have this portion completed. So the 3-year study mark ends at the distribution of the chief's report. That's where the Corps will say, like, here's all of our recommendations, here's the rate allocation scenario. By starting this more proactively, we're hoping that we can make any potential errors or changes that we see on the front end, because once that chief report comes down, we won't be able to do anything else. We'll have to defend it as is, so we shouldn't be asking for any more money.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I want to make sure that we're clear. Yeah, there you go. Okay. We're not going to ask for more money on the modeling, but yeah, that's right. Okay.
Did you have something? No? Okay. All right. I believe there is a resolution to be read. Please read the resolution.
Whereas, in conjunction with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. ACE, reallocation feasibility study of Whitney Lake, the Brazos River Authority requires hydrological modeling services to support the U.S. ACE's modeling efforts and reallocation scenarios. Whereas, after a public solicitation process, the Brazos River Authority selected Hazen and Sawyer for purposes of contract and scope of work negotiations. Whereas the Brazos River Authority has negotiated a contract with Hazen and Sawyer for such water resources modeling services. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager CEO to negotiate and execute a contract for the water resources modeling services required in connection with the Whitney reallocation feasibility study as determined necessary by the general manager, CEO, for an amount not to exceed $280,000.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. A motion was made by Director Lloyd, a second by Director Savage. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geezy,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez, Director Crone,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action on copper ion generator project budget amended. Brad Burnett, Central Lower Basin Regional Manager.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is an action item. We're requesting a 2024 budget amendment to complete the copper ion generator project at the Williamson County Regional Rail Water Line intake structure on Stillhouse Hollow. Y'all may remember us coming to you a year or so ago for the construction contract on this project, but basically the purpose of this project is to protect the pump station and our pipeline from zebra mussels. I've got just a few pictures here kind of to give you an idea of what the heck a copper ion generator is. But the pictures on the left is a building at the top. That's what houses the actual copper ion generator. And then the picture at the bottom left is an actual picture from within that building where that piece of equipment's located. And then the picture on the right is the intake structure in Stillhouse Hollow. And so the copper ion generator takes solid copper rods and turns that into a solution. And then we have pumps that send that solution out along the bridge of the intake structure. Okay, this is not. I'm sorry, y'all have a different picture here than what I have. But so this the inside of the building. The copper ion generator is sitting in there, not in your picture, but in mine here it is. And then on the intake structure of Stillhouse Hollow, the solution gets piped out there. So zebra mussels don't like the copper. It'll kill them in high enough concentrations, but in the concentrations that we're going to be dosing it, it just makes it where they don't want to colonize and they won't clog up our pumps and our pipeline. The project is almost completed. We'll be done with it next month. We've had a little bit of issues with the high water levels at Stillhouse Hollow. Some of the last steps, there's some dive work that needs to be done. But we're going to be needing a budget amendment to move some money that we had in the 23 budget into 24 in order to get the project completed. And again, it's just a timing thing with money that we were looking at toward the end of last fiscal year versus moving into this fiscal year. The overall project cost is still the same. And it's a cost reimbursable project as well. So our 3 customers pay all the costs for the project. It's the City of Georgetown, City of Round Rock, and the Brushy Creek Municipal Utility District. And I think the amendment is about $330,000 that we're needing to move into this year's budget.
Any questions for Brad?
Apologize for the pictures. I had some great ones here in my notes. I just didn't get them up there. So,
Seeing no questions, please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby approves and authorizes an amendment to increase the fiscal year 2024 Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line Copper Ion Generator Project budget and corresponding customer contributions by $330,000 from $1,846,000 to $2,176,000 to cover timing differences in project delivery.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. A motion was made by Director Crone, a second by Director Henderson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geezy,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Ruiz,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Item number 7, discussion and possible action on Possum Kingdom water quality modeling contract by Tiffany Monson, Environmental and Compliance Manager. And Tiffany, I'm excited to see you're pushing dirt out there for your new project.
So are we. It's a little muddy and a little messy, but we're drying out and we're making some good progress. So we're super excited.
Yep.
After some discussions with a PK Lake Association and some meetings that David had, he came back and asked me to develop a project really for all 3 lakes, but we're going to do it in 3 pieces to start doing some water quality modeling to give us some better tools to help us meet our mission of protecting the natural resources of Texas. PK was chosen first because it's our most pristine lake. It's the highest storage in our system, and it serves a variety of customers up and down the main stem, all the way from Abilene and Stephen County above the lake, all the way down to the Freeport area with Gulf Coast Water Authority, Dow Chemical, NRG, some of those customers to the bottom. And this is just a map of all the potential water customers of BRA that may be pulling at any given year water release from PK out of the system. PK's water quality is probably the cleanest and most sensitive of any of our reservoirs. It's a calcium carbonate substrate lake, which means it's very clear naturally, which makes it more sensitive to inputs of nutrients, sediment, things like that naturally. It has high transparency because of that. And in TCQ's latest 2022 integrated report of Texas water quality, it was rated fully supporting of all its designated uses and has no impairments or concerns for surface water quality standard attainability. One thing that's unique about PK that Granbury and Limestone don't have yet is TCEQ, with the prodding of EPA over the last 2 decades, has been working on developing numeric nutrient criteria for reservoirs. That's a real indicator of the eutrophic status and basically how much primary productivity, how much vegetation, how much algae is out there. And that's a very fine line that you get too much and your lake becomes very smelly and very unattractive very quickly. So PK is one of the 39 lakes that TCEQ and EPA have agreed to a numeric nutrient standard on. And that standard is designed to be very protective of its current high water quality. Which means that there's very little room for increased nutrient loadings before we start triggering that we are not attaining that new standard and would be looking at an impaired water body, which then triggers a whole nother set of actions on behalf of TCEQ, EPA, and the reservoirs to address and bring that back in attainment with the standards. Right now, PK is currently compliant with that criteria, and this is perhaps TCEQ's most complex criteria that they've developed because it's based on 4 different parameters and how those different parameters rank it. And so it's complicated. So first parameter, transparency, which is how far can you see through the water column? And you'll see through this, you can see the effects of drought years and wet years as I walk through the next 4 slides. We're doing all right on transparency. Total nitrogen, we're kind of about a 50-50. Are we complying with the threshold? Phosphorus a little worse for us. We're over that threshold more often than we're under it. And the one that's really clear and we're doing really well on is total chlorophyll. That's the response. That's what you're going to see if your phosphorus and your nitrogen are too high. You're going to start to see that algae grow, and chlorophyll is how we measure that. But if you look at the units on the upper right-hand corner, we're currently running 7.1 micrograms per liter. If we go over 10.74 micrograms per liter, that's a problem. That's not a lot of change. A microgram per liter is a very small amount. Yes.
Rock, or is it something else
contributing to the high
In that
phosphorus.
part of the basin, there could be some, not, I wouldn't say naturally occurring right there around Possum Kingdom, but some upstream inputs from the geology above the reservoir. But also phosphorus is generally a good indicator of non-point source pollution runoff. Lawns being over fertilized, animal waste runoff into the lake that then breaks down. So there's a variety of non-point sources that generally contribute to it that are generally not as natural as one would hope. One of the things that's really concerning too around PK is we all know we have some real growing metropolitan areas that are encroaching out into the Brazos Basin where we've historically been very rural. Palo Pinto County is right on the edge of that, and they're starting to see the development. Some data I found on the U.S. Census Bureau had their population in the last year increasing by 4.7%. That's a pretty big increase for a 1-year time period. So we worked to develop a concept of a water quality model, and the support is to help us protect our water resources. It supports 2 of the items in our strategic plan, 3A3 and 3C3. And the goal is really to give us a scientifically based guidance on how land use changes in the watershed are going to impact water quality, and then allow us to pass that information on to regulatory agencies. Right now, we have very little. I write a lot of letters saying, here's my data, things are changing in this water body, TCEQ, please add nutrient standards to a discharge permit. But other than just presenting some generic water quality data right now, I don't have anything that gives me the ability to say, this is the impact I think I'm going to see because of this permit. So this will give us an ability to provide better input to the regulatory agencies that do have permitting authority. The project components, evaluation of all existing data. More than likely, we're going to need to do some field investigations, probably some dedicated work on flow dynamics within the reservoir, as far as how do the coves interact with the main body. Maybe some additional chlorophyll work to really look at the different types of algae that are in that reservoir. Do some working groups with basin local PK stakeholders, also the regulatory agencies, to make sure we're developing a tool that they will recognize as scientifically valid. Bring in a scientific advisory group too that is composed of limnologists and water quality modeling experts from the state of Texas. And then once the model's developed, and develop an implementation strategy for us. There's more than one way to store and operate that beast, and until IT sees what the final product looks like, they're not real sure which the best option is. And then users guides and trainings for both our IT staff and my staff to operate the model. What will it evaluate? Of course, land use changes, new discharges, changes in existing discharges in the watershed. Probably the biggest and most important tool I think I'm going to get is local effects modeling versus cumulative effects. Right now, TCEQ models one discharge impact on one water body. They don't look at the cumulative effect of all the discharges of the same type when they evaluate a permit application. When you come to your nutrients and when you come to your brine discharges, which are very popular in the upper basin for chlorides, dissolved solids, that cumulative effects analysis is key to see if you're going to see a negative impact on your reservoir. We did an RFP, advertised it for 6 weeks, received 3 proposals. The evaluation committee consisted of members of the upper basin staff, government customer relations staff, and my staff. Aqua Strategies was unanimously selected as the most qualified firm, and we have worked with them to negotiate contract scope. Like I said, they have stakeholders groups and regulatory agency workings groups, plus a scientific advisory group that's really going to do some QA for us. And if one of the first 2 groups comes with something that's maybe really out of left field, they can help provide us some value or input. Same for providing us, if we go do the extra chlorophyll work we think we might need, are we going to be able to improve the model's accuracy by X%, or can we just rely on a literature value? So that's where that scientific advisory group will really come in handy. Because we have these input groups that we haven't met with yet, there's a lot of certainty in the final scope. So we have worked with Aqua Strategies to try to develop options and alternatives based on what we hear from these different groups. And they have put not to exceed cost to every option and alternative in there. In addition to those options, depending on what gets selected, that can change the duration of the project. It could be, if it's a quick desktop effort without a lot of field work, we could get it 3 to 4 years. If we have to stop and do a couple years of field data collection, it may take us an extra year or two. And BRA has in the contract the authority. We'll select the options and direct Aqua Strategies when we get to those decision points which way we want to go. The cost is overall a not to exceed cost established for the options and alternatives. Adding together the worst case alternatives, the cost would be $2,973,843. If we selected all the lowest level of effort options, it'd be $1,683,531. Our actual spend will probably be somewhere in between those two numbers. I doubt we will select the highest level of effort options all the time. And also because there is some uncertainty because of the input from these stakeholder groups, I'm recommending we add a 10% contingency. I think we've worked really hard to come up with a really comprehensive plan that will address everything we need in regard to evaluating PK's future compliance with Texas surface water quality standards. But having worked with watershed stakeholders before, I know sometimes there's something may come up that they have an idea on or a thought on that we just haven't thought of that may need to be addressed. And I think that is my last slide. Are there any questions?
Director Lloyd and then Director Savage.
Yes.
I think this is very important to do. I'll start with that. The sampling that you do, is that just in the lake, or are you going to does it go up tributaries and the main stem?
For the water quality sampling, we have samples all the way up the basin. Either we collect them or TCEQ collects them, and we work jointly on our monitoring plans. For sampling specific to the model, it would mostly be in-lake interactions. That's the big component. We have pretty good data from USGS on flows coming into the reservoir, where they're coming from in the upper basin, so it would really be internally to how does the water move within the reservoir, which is something my team doesn't have the ability or the knowledge to collect. And with the advanced or enhanced algae collection, that's, again, we're really trying to see how the reservoir is going to react to changes. So we're not as concerned with the algae composition upstream. Plus, odds are very good they'd be very different. What likes to live in a reservoir isn't necessarily going to like to live in a flowing environment. So most of our field work is anticipated to be in reservoir.
But with an understanding of where, if it's a elevated phosphorus issue and there's a discharge permit on a tributary, this will give us the ability to say we don't need any more discharge from that tributary to fight the permit applicant who's saying it's not going to cause a problem in your lake, and we would have science to back up the premise that we would, and therefore what I'm getting at is having standing to go protest the permit.
And I can't monitor every tributary up there, but we do have monitoring stations on all the major segments above, so the main stem. So we're not really gonna be modeling is the Clear Fork going to change, but we will be modeling it. Do we think PK would change? And it's really gonna have to depend, and that's one of the things that's still up for negotiation, by parameter. There's no point modeling E. coli all the way up to Lubbock. because we know most of those aren't going to make it all the way downstream to affect our lake. So that's going to be part of the evaluation too, with that scientific group and the modelers for each parameter. How far up the watershed do we need to model to give us a good and accurate result on how PK is going to respond?
Director Lloyd, but I think the statement that you're making in your question is spot on.
Well,
because you're welcome. I think that this is a multi-year budget, but I think you'll see in future years that we'll continue to bring this back, and this will be an ongoing living model and allow us to deal with new permits, new water quality issues that either the stakeholders or the BRA staff or the data suggest, so that when we have people standing here in front of you that want us to protest something, we can use this science to protest that and get standing if that's something that we needed to do.
Tiffany, this is a broader question, and maybe Laura Lee too, because, we're very good, obedient, and even proactive at trying to adhere to new regulatory issues. And so we do things, to try to get data. But there was a pretty significant Supreme Court decision regarding the Chevron doctrine and EPA. And do you see that changing? Because, we've got, 100% range there from $1.5 million to $3 million, and and maybe we don't even have to be the defendant, but if we saw other people challenging some of these things, can we drag our feet, not spend so much of this money if there's a chance that some of these regulations might not be enforceable because other people are challenging them?
Yeah, so the overturning of Chevron is something that we've looked at internally, and we're running risk assessments for all of our federal projects, as well as how that may affect on the state level. But the way that Chevron is and how it applies to federal stuff, it's a little different here in Texas. So the state level risks are minimal in comparison.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're thinking about it, because
yes.
We do a lot proactively, and maybe we should just drag our feet a little bit, and see if it's even a law before we go too far down, some of these. But this is great, and we need to do these things to protect our environmental resources.
Yeah, we're looking at all the options on that one.
Thank you.
Director Lattimore.
I think it's important. The model you're talking about developing would be one that all the stakeholders would have a part in, but you're not talking about the BRA in any way getting into the enforcement end of things. This would be only a repository for the expertise and for other agencies to still maintain their enforcement rights.
Correct. We have zero regulatory authority, are not asking for a new regulatory authority. I will retire if you try to tell me to go down that path.
I think that's really important. And for the other directors who have not been involved, I will tell you that I was involved in the initial stakeholders meetings and was extremely pleased. Here comes David. He'll probably speak to it too. But we had great representation from not only the local PK people, but from TCEQ and the Parks and Wildlife. I mean, it was amazing, the folks that showed up to be stakeholders in that initial meeting. But the BRA is taking the leadership position. But the tool we'll be developing is not for enforcement for the BRA. It would be for other agencies to use as they move into enforcement. But I for one think it's critical that we develop a model and a tool to be used. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Director Embra.
Yeah, I'll be short. Great presentation. Good job communicating. My question is, you've done a good job showing us the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. Somewhere it's going to be somewhere in between, but then we're asking for a 10% contingency on the worst case scenario. Can you explain that?
I'm just concerned that between the stakeholder processes, something's going to come up that we missed, that I didn't think of, that Aqua Strategies didn't think of, and that would give David the flexibility to respond add something to the Aqua Strategies contract as far as the scope without having to come back to the board. We can certainly slash that contingency if you don't like it. I don't think we'll need it. It was more of a just in case there was something really outside the box that we did not come up with when we developed our scope.
Okay. Director Jimenez.
Yes. Thank you for the information. It's really honorable for us to do the research so we could have the data. Since it's going to be able to be utilized, is there any way to partner, or is anybody else partnering with us? Universities, anything like that?
We did not pursue partnership. One of my big concerns when you pursue a partnership with a project like this is you lose your individual control over said project. What universities would want as a research tool will be very different from what we need as a day-to-day application. So we have not pursued trying to seek additional funding or inputs from other partners.
Director Huber.
Tiffany, I understand then once this is done, we're going to extend this onto Lake Granbury and Lake Limestone. Is that correct?
I would very much like to do that at some point in time. As we move through, this is kind of our pilot project. How does it work? How does TCEQ respond to it? I will say that the battle of nutrient standards has been a long and hard fought one between TCEQ and EPA. The reason Limestone and Granbury don't have nutrient standards is the two agencies couldn't agree on what that standard should be. And that's a battle that's still being actively fought day to day. Had EPA gotten their way, Granbury would already be an impaired reservoir. And Limestone would be very, very close to it, if not over it. So I think there's definite benefits for both reservoirs. I think Limestone is very similar to PK in that it's traditionally been rural. Everything's been kind of quiet, but it's slowly starting to be found too. Is people start to explore the state and other lakes at closer to populated areas are getting filled up. So I think Limestone would definitely be one that would be key to do again. Granbury is fairly well developed, but I still think as it continues to develop, we're going to see, we've already been through tangentially a very unpleasant wastewater discharge permit battle in Hood County recently. So I think it would still be a good tool for Granbury too. Granbury's pretty far down the path of eutrophication and that it already supports a large amount of algae. It's close to the point where I start to become concerned if we have a shift in the algae community from right now we have green algae, which is relatively harmless. It may be smelly. It may not be as attractive in some of the coves, but it's harm to a blue-green algae dominated community, which then starts to bring in concerns for human health because some blue-greens can be toxic. So I would like to do this for all three reservoirs over time, but that time frame is, like I said, this could be a 3 to 7 year length of project. So do one at a time. So it's going to be a long range goal.
I think you're saying Lake Granbury is not as pristine as Jim's Lake.
It's Jim's Lake. Go ahead.
Maybe you already addressed it. Why are we starting with PK and not Limestone or Granbury?
Because of the attention to the growth and the new permits and the issues around the lake is the reason that we chose Lake.
More emergent. Okay.
That's right, more emergent issues.
And it's got the cleanest, most pristine water quality, so it's going to respond to smaller inputs more dramatically because it is so clean.
Pristine.
And I forgot to introduce Tim Osteen with Aqua Strategies is here today.
Thank you for being here.
Congratulations.
Okay. Thank you very much for Tiffany answering all the questions and all the comments and conversation. We have a resolution. Please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager CEO to execute a contract for the development of the Possum Kingdom Water Quality Model with Aqua Strategies in an amount not to exceed $2,973,843. Be it further resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager CEO, if he deems appropriate, to increase the contract value by an amount not to exceed 10% of the original contracted amount for additional services.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. There was a motion made by Director Crone, a second made by Director Lloyd. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores.
Yes.
Director Huber.
Yes.
Director Lloyd.
Yes.
Director Abraham.
Yes.
Director Boren.
Yes.
Director Geezy.
Yes.
Director Henderson.
Yes.
Director Jimenez.
Yes.
Director Crone.
Yes.
Director Lattimore.
Yes.
Director Embro.
Yes.
Director Parks.
Yes.
Director Ruiz.
Yes.
Director Savage.
Yes.
Director Taylor.
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
At this time, we're going to take a break and reconvene at 12:45.
This is our lunch break.
Board of Directors will now enter back into session. Agenda item number 8, discussion and possible action on authorization of 2024 interruptible water in the Little River System by Aaron Abel, Water Services Manager. Aaron.
This item requests authorization to make additional interruptible water available for the Little River subsystem. Due to further improvement of the water supply conditions in that particular part of the basin, you might recall that we made around 42,000 acre feet of interruptible water available in March. At that point, the reservoirs outside of the Little River Basin were at least 99% full or storing water in the flood control pool. And at that point, Lake Proctor remained in stage 4 of our drought contingency plan, and Lake Belton and the Stillhouse Hollow Georgetown system were in stage 2 of our DCP. After very wet April and May, reservoir levels in the Little River system have improved substantially. This is the status of the BRA water supply system as of last Wednesday. So we're at 98% full, storing about 1.9 million acre feet of water. You'll notice all reservoirs within the system are at 98% full or greater, with the exceptions of Lake Proctor and Lake Georgetown. So Lake Proctor is at 79% full, Lake Georgetown's 82% full. Lake Proctor remains in stage 1 drought watch. So we rescinded all of the drought declarations with the exception of Proctor. And the stage 1 drought watch is a 5% reduction in water use. Overall, the Little River system gained just under 280,000 acre feet of storage over the last 4 months. So these are the 2024 interruptible water availability values that are calculated and shown by reservoir. So the first column is the reservoir or subsystem of reservoirs. In the right-hand column is the amount of interruptible water that is calculated to be available. The reservoirs shaded in green represent the amounts that were authorized in March, and that was just under 42,000 acre feet. The segments in yellow are calculated availabilities representative of the reservoirs within the Little River system. So the Proctor, the Belton, Stillhouse, Georgetown, and Granger system, and that totals a little over 13,000 acre feet. So in total, what we're asking today is to authorize this additional 13,000 acre feet, making the total around 55,000 acre feet for the whole basin. We do have an interruptible water sale procedure that outlines the calculation of the interruptible availabilities and includes a safety factor of 0.25, which provides a 75% factor of safety. The interruptible water sale procedure also stipulates that no interruptible water will be made available from Lake Proctor when any drought declaration is in effect for that reservoir under BRA's drought contingency plan. So what we're asking today as far as Proctor is we're asking authorization contingent upon additional improvement at Proctor. So we would essentially need to come out of stage 1 drought watch at Proctor to make that 5 acre feet available essentially. So as far as the request from the Little River watershed, this is the map of the locations that are requested. And so I'll point out, so this is Lake Granger here, Lake Stillhouse Hollow, and Lake Belton. And so these are the requested diversion points. There's about nine requests, 7 in the central basin and 2 in the lower basin. All of these requests are for agricultural crop irrigation. So what this is our recommendation, to authorize the 13,000 acre feet and authorize Proctor only if it exits stage 1 drought watch. And we do have a resolution.
When was the last time that Proctor was stage 1 or out of stage 1?
In 2021, probably the early part of 2021. So that summer was really, really wet, and I think we had most all of the reservoirs more or less full, and that's when the most recent drought started. It was in the fall of 2021.
Okay. Thank you. Questions, comments? Okay, please read the resolution.
Whereas, in accordance with the Brazos River Authority interruptible water sale procedure, the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority originally considered the authorization of 2024 interruptible water at its November 2023 board meeting. And whereas, due to continued drought conditions, exceptionally low reservoir inflows, and low reservoir storage at the time, calendar year 2024 interruptible water was not initially authorized for sale. And whereas, due to substantial improvement in drought conditions in late 2023 and early 2024 across much of the basin, excluding the Little River Reservoir subsystem, 41,913 acre feet of interruptible water was authorized for areas outside the Little River Reservoir subsystem at its March 2024 board meeting. And whereas, although most of the Little River Reservoir subsystem has received significant inflows and storage increases since March 2024, Lake Proctor remains in stage 1 drought watch condition. Now, therefore, be it further resolved that no new interruptible water availability agreements shall be authorized for diversion from Lake Proctor unless the stage 1 drought watch condition is terminated prior to December 31, 2024. Be it further resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby approves a safety factor of 0.25 for use in determining the amounts of interruptible water to make available in calendar year 2024. Be it further resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager CEO to make an additional 13,023 acre feet of interruptible water available for the Little River Reservoir subsystem, in addition to the 41,913 acre feet currently approved, for a total of 54,936 acre feet of interruptible water available for calendar year 2024.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion made by Director Lattimore and second made by Director Wilson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Abraham?
Yes.
Director Boren? Director Geezy?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Jimenez?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Embro?
Yes.
Director Parks? Director Ruiz?
Yes.
Director Savage?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action on Lake Limestone Tanner Gate Construction Engineering Services by Brad Burnett, Central and Lower Basin Manager.
Hello again, good afternoon. This item is an action item. We're seeking approval for amendment of the professional services agreement that we have in place with Stantec for engineering and resident project representative services associated with the Lake Limestone Tanner Gate replacement project. And we have 3 gentlemen with Stantec with us today. They're the last men standing over in the gallery from earlier today. We had a full house, but they've hung in there with us to the end today. So just real quick, some of you may remember this project. We've been working on it for a while now. This is the downstream side of Lake Limestone Dam. We've got 5 large Tainer gates there. You can see the individual gates in the bays, and so we're in the process of replacing all of those 5 gates. In this picture here, you can see gate 2. I don't remember when this was taken, but it was taken out of service for some maintenance or testing, and you can see it's pretty much in the full open position there with the bulkhead in place in front of it, and that bulkhead is what keeps the water off of the gates when we need to work on them. So main part of the project is replacing these 5 gates. Each one of the gates has a hoist system above it, and part of the project early on was engineering evaluation to determine if we would need to replace the hoist as well. And in fact, that was a decision that we made to do that. And so each of the 5 gates has a hoist like you see this one here above it. And those hoists have electric motors with cables that go down from the hoist that attach to the gate that raise them into that position that we were just looking at with gate number 2 a while ago. And this is just a kind of a cool picture that was taken with our drone that's just downstream of the dam. You can see the gate there, the hoist above it. And if you look really close on the left and right sides of the gate, you can see the cables there. It looks like 3 cables that run down from the hoist and attach to the front of the gate. So again, the main purpose of this project is replacing those 5 gates and the 5 hoist systems. So this picture just provides some perspective on the construction project that we're underway with. If you can orient yourself, you can see the gated spillway in the dam there in the background. You can see the contractor staging area there in the foreground. The yellow crane that's on the barge out in the water, that crane is actually used to load stuff on and off the barge and then to transport it over to the dam. And when they're working, they actually have that crane barge attached to the dam and work from the lakeside for the most part of the dam. You can also see the big red crane there on the emergency spillway that's used to put material out onto the barge for transport. And I've got some better pictures of the new gates, but you can see some of the new gates laying there and a piece of one of our older gates laying there as well. So just a little bit about the timeline here. This project's been going on since 2018. We executed the design contract with Stantec then and started working on design through 2018 and 2019. 2020 rolled along. We all remember, what a year 2020 was with COVID beginning that spring. And so we continued working on the design through 2020, through COVID, and came out of 2021 and completed the design for the project and went out for bids for construction phase services. We received 4 bids on this project. Some of you may remember that. We had bids ranging from, I think, 17 million up to 38 million. McMillan Jacobs Associates was the low bidder, and that's who we ended up selecting. If you kind of take your eyes down to the lower left side of the time frame into 2022, we signed that construction contract with them in the spring and issued notice to proceed there, I think around April or May in 2022. For the rest of that year, the contractors' activities were primarily consisting of making arrangements with their subcontractors in the fabrication facility. A big part of the project was actually building these gates for us to install. And so that's what was mainly going on in that period from 2022 into spring of 23, where you see MJA mobilizing. And that construction mobilization, that's when they begin to move onto the site and bring their cranes and hook their barges up and things like that from the picture that I just showed you. What you don't see on here, shortly after their mobilization, we were supposed to have the first gate arrive for the project in May of 2023. And there were I guess backlog issues with their fabrication shop. We don't really know, but they were very late on getting the gate manufactured, and we ultimately didn't get a gate delivered out there until January of 2024. So if you move over into 2024, you can see there the lower boxes. We started outage on gate 1 this past spring, right after all the heavy rain, and we were kind of having to work through some of those storms as well, moving the stuff in and out of the way of the dam, because when we're releasing water, it affects what can be done on the project. But we started the gate 1 outage, I want to say in April or May, and we've got gate 1 completely removed now. And we're working on hopefully swinging the new gate into place this week on Thursday, actually. So after some delays with getting the gates and the hoist manufactured, we're starting to see a little bit of progress out there. Unfortunately, the substantial completion date for the contract was supposed to have been this summer in June, and final completion was supposed to have been August 9th. But given where we are with the status of getting the gates delivered to the site, we're looking at probably another year We're hoping it'll be shorter than that. And if they end up having good luck with this first gate, it'll tell us a lot about how fast the process is going to go. Again, this is a unique dam, a unique project. There's no other one like it. And so a lot of what we find when we get out in the field out there, sometimes is better and sometimes is worse. But I think once we get through gate one, hopefully here in the next few weeks, we'll have a good idea. Maybe the project will end up picking up some speed and moving forward a little faster. So several issues have come up since we started construction. First, we had some delays with the selection of a hoist manufacturer. So the contractor, they're one of their responsibilities that they were to find a competent contractor to make and fabricate the hoist and get those delivered. There were some issues there. We also had some issues with how they were going to hook that barge I showed you up to the dam and actually do their work. The new stop logs and lifting beam, I showed you a picture of one of the stop logs there early on, but one of the other things we're getting out of this project is a new set of stop logs or bulkheads. So we're going to have the existing set that we already have at the dam plus a new set at the end of the project. So we'll have two sets of stop logs. And there were some issues with construction of those. But really the most noteworthy thing is the last bullet there is just the substantial delays in getting the gates and the hoist successfully built and tested. Where we are right now, like I said, we've got the hoist and gate in Bay 1 completely removed. We're getting ready to put the first new gate in this week. And again, hopefully that will help us refine the schedule going forward. Some pictures here just to show you some of the work that's going on. Again, this is a really big project. The scale is very large and it's hard to even visualize it in these pictures. But the picture on the left, you can see them cutting out the old gate 1 with the torch there. You can see the bulkhead in place just upstream of the gate where the boat's kind of up against the bulkhead there and the guy's kind of watching them cut that gate. Then in the right, they're swinging the piece of gate 1 off of the spillway and across the dam to load it onto this barge that you see here on the right and then transport it back over to the laydown area on the emergency spillway. This is a picture from the downstream side of the dam. You can see gate 1 there on the left is now completely gone. The hoist above it's gone, and you can see the work platform that the contractor has built there. And again, that's where they're going to be putting in the first gate this week. Some more pictures here. These really give you an idea of scale here, especially the top left. I think I told y'all when I brought this project to you before that each one of these gates in terms of square footage is bigger than that wall over there. They're huge. They're 28 feet tall and 40 feet long, very heavy. And you can really see the perspective here, especially in the picture up at the top left with the guy in the yellow jacket standing next to the gate. You can also see, I think we've got 3 gates on site right now, and the remaining 2 are in the process of being fabricated. So this is a summary of the professional services agreement with Stantec, and this is what the amendment that we're proposing to you today is about. We executed this contract with them back in 2018, and it included all the engineering services required for the project, from design all the way through the bid phase, all the way through construction with the on-site resident project representative services, as well as the other engineering and administrative work during construction. And so you can see the total there was $4.2 million. So the design and bid phase services of the project were completed again back in that 2018 to 2022 period, and they completed those tasks below the levels that we had set in the contract. So those tasks came in slightly under budget. We went out for bids in 2021. Again, that was post-COVID, and really one of the big drivers and part of the need for additional funding is that in 2018, when Stantec was preparing their fee for the project, they surveyed the marketplace, surveyed contractors that they knew that do this type of work to get an idea of the duration that it would take. And so at the time they did that, we were assuming it was going to be about 19 months of construction time on the project. Well, if you fast forward up to 2021, when we went out for bids, they went back out at that time, surveyed the market again, and the feedback that we got from the contracting community then was they were going to need more time. And so we also added a little bit of time for weather delays. We went from the original schedule of 19 to 27 months. And, ultimately we were wanting to make sure that we got as many bidders as possible. We didn't want to advertise a construction schedule that was so tight that scared construction firms away. So we extended it, another 8 months, I guess, and went out for bids. Ultimately, again, we selected MJA, and at the time, Stantec, it was going to try to kind of wait and see how the project went. I think there was some hope that maybe they could get all the work done for what we had in the original contract. The construction schedule was still pretty unknown at that time, and if we would have been lucky and it would have gone faster, maybe that would have worked. But at this point, we're going to need more funds for them to be able to continue providing the services that we need to get the project completed. So here, this is just a summary of some of the information on the construction contract. So what we're talking about today is the amendment to the engineering contract. This is the construction contract that we have with MJA. And so we executed that contract for about $17.7 million. And you can see that the board authorized a contingency of $1.8 million at the time that was authorized a couple of years ago. So far through April the 30th, we've paid close to $10 million on the project, and we've used about $254,000 of that contingency. One of the key provisions in this contract is we've got a liquidated damage provision of $4,100 per day in there to account for delays on the project, and that's what we've seen with the gates being late getting to the site, and so we're getting to the point where we're going to start withholding those. And the contract also provides for recovery of some of our engineering costs from the contractor in specific circumstances. So there's several categories of those costs that the contract provides for that recovery. There's requests for information that are associated with costs or that are requested for changes that the contractor makes or errors, excessive submittals, like, I think we provide one original and then 2 or 3 resubmittals. And then after that, if we have to keep asking for resubmittals, the contractor's got to pay for that. Substitutions, in some cases, the contractor may make substitutions. If they do that, they've got to pay. And then for defective work. And so to date, we've got about $200,000, I think, identified that we believe are recoverable from the contract that will help offset some of the increases to the engineering fees that we're asking for today. So this summarizes what we're requesting, the changes to the agreement with Stantec. You can see we're proposing to increase that total fee from $4.2 million up to about $6.2 million. And the $566,286 associated with that's first bullet there under the $4 million. That's for that original 8-month extension of the construction schedule when we went out for bids. We added 8 months on top of what was originally contemplated. And then the next thing is basically just for them to continue providing the services through the construction project till we get to completion. And again, what we've done here for that dollar figure that you see is assumed, it's going to take another year to get done. And based on what we've seen so far through construction and factoring in Stantec's cost for the engineering contract administration and services, as well as the resident project representative services, that's what we're looking at. So we're looking at an amended contract total value of about $6.2 million. And again, we believe a substantial portion of that increase is potentially recoverable from the contractor, and we are pursuing that. So this just summarizes by task. I showed you early on the original contract, and you can see the second column there where the increases are. You'll note in task 1, 2, and 3 that we've already incorporated amendments to reallocate the savings that we had in those tasks to help with the construction-related tasks. But really, again, the big thing here is you look at task 6, it's about $1 million for the continued resident project representative services. And that's having an engineer on site every minute of the day when the contractor is working to make sure that, we're getting what we're paying the contractor for. I think this is the last slide. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions from you if you have any.
Director Cron.
When the gates are removed and all the associated hardware and they go off, where do they go off to? What happens to all of that?
The contractor is going to dispose of them, and I believe we've built in a salvage credit into the construction contract for that.
Thank you.
Director Embro.
Doing my math, just so that everybody's on the same page, we're talking about an additional almost $2 million?
Correct.
For the amendment?
Correct. Yeah, it's basically you see tasks 4, 5, and 6 are where the increases are. And we're looking at another year. This assumes that we're going to be working on the project through next summer. if we get through quicker than that, if these gates go in quicker, then our costs will be less because we're only going to pay them, what it takes. And so, we're looking at the cost of their RPR guy being out there on site 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week or whatever. And that's how we calculated this cost. But again, it's a unique project, and obviously we're not where we want to be. I'm hopeful that we're going to get through quicker than a year. And if we do, it could be if we finish in 6 months, we're looking at half of this is what we would ultimately pay. But it may take a year or two. We won't know until we get there.
Thank you.
Director Royce?
I have a question about Task 7. Are those paper manuals or CD manuals like this?
We'll have it digitally, I'm sure. We may have paper copies out at the dam for the guys out there, but we'll have all that information digitally as well, saved on our network.
It seems like a lot of money for that.
Yeah, that task is not changing. That was what we had negotiated in the original contract.
Director Henderson?
So a minute ago, you said that a substantial portion of this $2 million increase would be pursued from the contractor. How much of that $2 million do you think is truly recoverable? And, by going down that path, are we maybe straining a relationship with the contractor in that?
Well, I'll be honest with you. We're already in somewhat of a strained relationship with the contractor with regard to the delays. We're all working together, BRA, the engineer, and the contractor. Everybody's working in good faith to get this project completed right now. But when you look at the liquidated damages at $4,100 a day, let's assume that we do go another year and we start withholding those at the substantial completion date. That's $1.4 million if you multiply that out over the course of a year. And then again, the last bullet there, the contractor recovery, those tasks that are recoverable from the contractor for some of the engineering work that I mentioned, we're looking at about $200,000 there. So potentially most, if not all of it, but in reality, I know the contractor is going to argue about that. And so we're going to have to work through those issues and challenges as we move forward. And we're already engaged in doing that with the contractor. I mean, we've got a positive working relationship amongst all three parties right now. But we've had difficulties, and we're going to continue to have to manage them and figure them out as we go.
Sure. So the other question I have, go to that last slide where you have the proposed amendment. Yeah, that one. I'm looking at task 6, and it looks like we're adding 1 year to what was a 2-year project, something like that. So another year means $1 million, which that number seems super high, just because I feel like if the scope is the same, then why would it be double for 1 year versus 2 years?
So the $386,000 that you see from the original contract there, that was assuming, I believe, 8-month construction duration. So the RPR work only takes place once the contractor mobilizes. And so when we increased the construction period before we went out for bids, we increased that to 14 months. So even before the contractor got on site, we had essentially almost doubled the length of time that we were going to need someone on site. So that's part of that. And then the other part is that, like I said, if you look going forward, if we're going to have one of their guys out there for the next year while they're working, that's what you end up with when you look at, their rate for their RPR multiplied, by the hours in a week for the course of the next year. So it's really those two things.
Okay, thank you.
Director Lattimore?
Maybe this is a question that's already been answered, but it kind of hinges off of what the previous one was. But it seems to me, rather than us giving the contractor the money and then turning around and having to recover it through litigation, maybe it makes sense for us not to pay the contractor in the first place. If the relationship is already strained to begin with, wouldn't it make more sense to put the money maybe into an independent fund somewhere?
I think that's what, with the liquidated damages, that's what we're looking at.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's good enough. Thank you.
Director Sapp?
So just to clarify on that, so you're saying you're accruing $4,100 a day, and you've got about $200,000 that you're already kind of holding back out of their pay now? Okay.
Yeah. And, my hope is that we can work this out with the contractor and be done in 6 months and not have to accrue $4,100 a day for the next year. That's our goal, and we're all working diligently to do that.
Yes.
One thing that we can really identify as the reason why we're here today, and hope that, a year from now, we still won't be talking about this project?
This is my opinion, but my opinion on the reason we're here is because the gates took 9 months longer to build and get out there than what the contract specified. And we don't know, we can't see the inside workings of the relationship with McMillan and their fabricator, which is a facility down in Houston. But I understand through the grapevine that there's a strained relationship there. And frankly, I'll be honest with you, I think that coming out of COVID, the King Fab facility was backlogged with work. They've got, it's a big facility down there, and I think they were backlogged with work and ended up with just too much to do and not enough time to do it. And, they had other contractors and other projects that were competing for their time. So, to me, that's the reason that we're here. The contractor may argue different things, but to me, it's the gates took 9 months longer to get delivered than what they were supposed to. If we'd had a gate delivered in May of 2023 instead of January of this year, we'd be close to being done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager CEO to amend the 2018 Professional Services Agreement with Stantec for engineering services associated with the Lake Limestone Tanner Gate Replacement Project by increasing the total not to exceed fee from $4,237,655 to $6,183,339.
You've heard the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Motion made by Director Ruiz. Second.
Second. Tony.
Director Huber. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores.
A reluctant yes.
Director Huber.
Yes.
Director Lloyd.
Yes.
Director Abraham.
Yes.
Director Geezy.
Yes.
Director Henderson.
The same yes as Flores. Yes.
Director Jimenez.
Yes.
Director Crone.
Yes.
Director Lattimore.
Yes.
Director Embro.
Yes.
Director Ruiz.
Yes.
Director Savage.
Reluctant yes, 3.
Director Taylor.
Abstain.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Moving on to agenda item number 10, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2024, third quarter budget report by Michelle Derwall, Chief Financial Officer. Michelle.
Presiding Officer Michelle is here, and she's ready to talk about this for hours on end. Or I can tell you that it's in your book. If you have any questions, we'll take your questions.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 11, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2024, third quarter investment report.
Michelle is here to answer questions if you have any. If not, the report is in your book.
Questions for Michelle? All right. Moving on, and before we adjourn, it was brought to my attention that Director Geesey had a passing, her brother-in-law passed away about 2 weeks ago. And so please keep her and her family in your prayers. Thank you for being here with us today. I know it's very difficult. We're praying for you. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Our meeting is over at 1:19.